Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of UTVS News. I'm Sam Getzinger.
And I'm Joey Erickson. Thank you for joining us.
Again, tonight's newscast is special as we are just a few seconds away from airing a live interview with St. Cloud State President Robin Wacker.
Our very own UTVS News Director, Nia Adams, will be sitting down with the president to ask multiple questions that will help guide a discussion as to where St. Cloud State University is currently at.
Following the half-hour interview, join us back here for our regular newscast at 5 o'clock, where we will dive right into our Election Day coverage.
So stay tuned for that. But now we will toss it over to Nia Adams down in the KVSC studios.
Coming up tonight on UTVS News, Democrats have come to an agreement on lowering pharmaceutical prices.
And then the Monticello School District finds out the 2021 operating referendum results. We have the details.
But first, Minneapolis votes on whether or not to replace their police department with a public safety unit.
UTVS News starts right now.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to UTVS News. I'm Sam Getzinger.
And I'm Joey Erickson. Thank you for joining us. For all of those just tuning in, our news director, Nia Adams, just got done interviewing SCSU President Robin Wacker.
Some of the key topics from that interview were enrollment, an award St. Cloud State recently received, and the main takeaways from Dr. Wacker's TEDx talk that recently happened here in St. Cloud.
We have a lot of other news to talk about tonight, including all the latest election headlines you need to know about.
But first, we'll toss it over to UTVS Chief Meteorologist Kim Gomez for a first look at the Granite City forecast. Kim, what do we got going on outside?
Yes, Joey and Samuel, as we all know, it has been pretty chilly outside with these colder temperatures, but if we take a look at our weather headlines, that unsettled weather will continue throughout this week. Now, because of those colder temperatures, we will wake up to some fog tomorrow morning in your early morning commute, but thankfully though, temps do bounce back to the 50s this weekend. So if you have any plans, this is the time to do so because it will be pretty sunny this weekend. Now we do have a high of 44 degrees and a low of 27 degrees. Here's a look now into your tonight's lows. 29 degrees averaging up in the Twin Cities. In the teens, we're looking at 18 in Minot, 17 Rapid City, 33 Kansas City, and in Chicago, 32 degrees. Now for our cloud coverage, it has been pretty significant for some areas of the state like northeastern Minnesota, and you can tell that there is that lake effect moisture that is currently happening. That is usually generated by the warmer lake waters and some cold air that is moving in, but I will have more on this in my full forecast. Back to you guys.
Well, thank you very much, Kim. We start our election coverage tonight with Minneapolis voters rejecting ballot question 2, which would replace the police department with the Department of Public Safety. Nearly 81,000 residents voted no for 46% of the vote. Over 62,000 voted yes, or 44% of the vote. The ballot proposal would have changed the city charter that required the city to have a police department with a minimum number of officers. Supporters of the charter amendment say an overhaul of policing was necessary to eliminate police violence, while opponents state it would make communities already affected by violence more vulnerable.
With official election results tallied, there are a lot of people either relieved or worried about the future of Minneapolis. WCCO News reporter Susan Elizabeth Littlefield interviewed residents around the Minneapolis area to see what their opinions about the election are.
It's not just any election. This is a big one. A decision that affects every single person who lives, works, or plays in Minneapolis. Who will answer if they call for help? Who will keep the city safe? North Minneapolis voter John Martin says MPD needs to remain in place.
Yes, but I voted no because I don't quite understand it and they don't have a plan. They just put it on the ballot, don't have a plan. So if you're putting something on the ballot and you want the people to actually vote on it, first of all, they have to understand it.
South Minneapolis voter Carol Caruth agrees.
And I voted no on that because I don't think we should get rid of the police department.
That having the city council there to be in check of the mayor.
In central Minneapolis, Eric Romano says it's time for change.
Obviously, the city has gone through a lot that I believe that it's worth a chance to give another option or another perspective to address the issues that we have.
He supports the push to make a new public safety department.
I believe a public safety department, they should be committed to living in the city as well as caring about the city.
Back on the north side, the pastor of a church that's held funeral after funeral of violence victims says he's using his voice outside of the pulpit.
We need our police department, and it does need reform. We understand that. But to just defund the police or to remove our police chief at this point, at this juncture, doesn't make any sense at all.
Passion from both sides as everyone watches to see who will keep watch over this city.
Also related to Minneapolis that broke earlier this afternoon, Minneapolis voters have re-elected Mayor Jacob Frey for a second term. After the final round of calculations, Frey won with over 70,000 votes with a final percentage of 56, according to the Associated Press. The closest runner-up, Kate Knuth, had 44%. Frey had more than a dozen candidates run against him for the mayoral race. Frey risked his bid for re-election when he opposed the push to replace the city's police department and faced sharp pressure from more progressive Democrats and conservatives.
Residents in Minneapolis also approved the change to a strong mayor system where the mayor has more power over city agencies. The ballot question was approved with 52% of the final vote, with over 74,000 residents in favor. Many large cities use the strong mayor system, including St. Cloud. Previously, Minneapolis was a weak mayor system where the mayor and the city council shared executive powers.
Wrapping up our election coverage in Minneapolis, residents approved question ballot 3 to authorize rent control. 53% of residents voted yes to the question, which is roughly 76,000 votes to 47% voting no, or nearly 67,000 votes. The ballot question would give Minneapolis City Council the authorization to regulate rents on private residential property in the city.
Now moving to St. Paul, Mayor Melvin Carter won his spot at re-election with a strong lead of 62% to 13%. Carter received nearly 37,000 votes. Meanwhile, Dino Guerin received just below 8,000. St. Paul also uses the ranked choice voting system. With a strong lead above 50%, he was officially declared the winner. Carter made history as the city's first black mayor when he was elected back in 2017. In his first term, he raised the city's minimum wage to $15 and introduced a guaranteed income program. He has faced criticism over garbage collection and gun violence. However, Carter had 7 candidates run against him in this election.
Staying in St. Paul, residents voted unanimously to pass a bill aimed at keeping annual rent increases from going above 3%. The proposal won with 53% of the vote compared to 47%. There are a couple exceptions, being property taxes and taxes from major improvements. This policy is also expected to protect low-income renters from unfair tax increase. People opposing this tax argue that rent control will hurt housing developments in St. Paul, leading to higher rent prices.
Moving to the Monticello region, Independent School District 882 proposed a 3-question referendum, which would help avoid a $3.1 million budget cut. This extra funding would help with educational programming, technology infrastructure, and staffing needs. Combined, the 3 proposed referendum questions would have generated an additional $5.3 million in annual funding, while resulting in an estimated annual tax increase of $370 on a $250,000 home. Shortly after the polls closed at 8 on Tuesday, the results were calculated with Monticello residents rejecting the 3-question referendum. The first question had 1,056 yes votes and 1,842 no votes. Question number 2 had 980 yes votes and 1,914 no votes. And finally, the number 3rd question had 956 yes votes and 1,944 no votes.
A prominent Republican donor charged with multiple counts of sex trafficking will have to remain in jail while he prepares his defense. U.S. District Judge Patrick Schiltz cited a very troubling testimony that Anton Lazaro threatened law enforcement and prosecutors after he was arrested. Lazaro allegedly told Minneapolis police officer Brandon Bruger he knew where he lived and said federal prosecutor Laura Provenzino was, quote, going to regret this. Bruger also testified that Lazaro tried but failed to find personal information about an FBI agent.
The judge who oversaw the trial of Derek Chauvin will release the names of the jury involved. Hennepin County District Judge Peter Cahill will also release questionnaires they filled out during jury selection. The release follows a request made by the Associated Press to make the name public.
A federal jury convicted a former Minneapolis police officer for taking drugs from people and using them for himself. 29-year-old Ty Yindra had 3 separate investigations going on with these incidents. In 2 of the 3 investigations, he filed false reports and failed to mention the discovery of pills. The jury found Yindra guilty of 2 civil rights violations as he conducted 2 illegal searches. Yindra's defense attorneys tried to argue that he threw away the pills, but there was no evidence of that happening.
Eden Prairie police are investigating the death of a woman found in a hotel room along with an injured man. Officers were called to do a welfare check at the Resident Inn in Eden Prairie when they discovered the 2. City spokeswoman says the man suffered significant injuries and was taken to Hennepin County Medical Center. Loren says no arrests have been made and police believe it was not a random attack.
Well, coming up next on UTVS News, Democrats have come to an agreement to lower prices of life-saving medications.
And then the Supreme Court is voting on one of the biggest gun cases in almost a decade.
We'll be right back.
Coming up tonight on UTVS News, positive news for Health Partners workers as the union avoids a possible strike.
And then, get the latest updates on the coronavirus.
But first, a fire at a recycling plant in Becker continues to burn after 24 hours.
UTVS News starts right now.
Good evening and welcome to UTVS News. I'm Alex Cotter.
And I'm Untrin. Thank you for joining us.
We start tonight with continuing coverage of the fire that has been burning for more than 24 hours in Becker, Minnesota.
The fire started around 2:30 a.m. Tuesday morning at the Northern Metals recycling plant.
Firefighters have been working around the clock battling the fire, including the 55th Civil Support Unit from the Minnesota National Guard.
The biggest concern is air quality for the residents of Becker. Becker Police and the Minnesota Department of Health have been monitoring the air quality, but say that so far there is no concern.
CBS has more information on the Becker fire.
The smoke is thick and the flames at times unrelenting.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy to see because, you know, there's just smoke going everywhere.
Crushed cars stacked for recycling on Northern Metals property in Becker continued to burn. Fire crews from surrounding departments stepped in to help, attacking the fire from all sides.
Well, what they're going to be doing is continuing to pick apart the pile of debris there to get to the root of the fire. And unfortunately what's happening is it keeps flaring up when they do that.
The dropping temperature is only compounding the problem.
Rotating the firefighters, it's cold out, you got water that's freezing. Access to water is also an issue.
And the billowing smoke from the fire put nearby schools on alert.
You know, one of the questions is, do we evacuate? Do we close school? What types of things do we do?
Becker Public Schools kept kids inside at recess and restricted air intake from outside as a precaution.
Safety is utmost concern.
Becker's Police Chief Brent.
The police chief updated City Council Tuesday night.
It looks like it's going to probably go for some time.
Sharing communities south of Becker are also feeling the impact of the smoke and stench.
Let's be honest, it's a big car fire. So the concern for particulates and stuff like that is the same concern you'd have for just about any other fire.
They advise people in the path to restrict time outside and those with respiratory issues to stay inside or in a well-ventilated area.
A new proposal for a provisional balloting system is now tied at the Senate. The bill requires voters who are registering on Election Day to be designated as provisional ballots until they are verified. Earlier this week, the committee approved the bill with a 6-3 vote. Democrats dispute the bill, claiming that fraud is a problem in Minnesota, while adding that the proposal could suppress voter turnout.
Violence broke out at a state-run mental health building in West St. Paul on Monday morning. Police responded to reports of a disturbance around 4 a.m. when officers arrived. The victim was stabbed in the face and was later pronounced dead. A 38-year-old resident has been arrested under suspicion of second-degree murder. The case is still under investigation.
Last Friday, a barn in northwest Iowa suffered a structural failure early in the morning, resulting in the fatality of a worker. Worthington, Minnesota native Humberto Jesus Lopez has been identified as the victim. Lopez was working inside the Remembrant Foods facility when the building collapsed. Authorities suspended the search last Friday due to safety concerns, but resumed on Saturday, where his body was found at around 2 p.m.
Health Partners employees can now breathe easy after the union came to a tentative labor agreement Tuesday night. The agreement was made after 17 hours of negotiations and avoids a strike that could have started later this week. The tentative agreement for the 1,800 union workers includes wage increases of the 7.5% over the next 3 years, alongside protections of health care benefits and protection of overtime pay. Voting on the agreement begins next week.
Coming up next, find out how you can support the local theater community in St. Cloud this weekend.
And then see this week's furry animal up for adoption at the Tri-County Humane Society.
Don't go anywhere.
The votes are in and the results are tallied.
We know now who will lead the St. Cloud area for the next few years, and you'll recognize several of them.
Starting off with Senate District 14, Democratic incumbent Eric Putnam has won his re-election. Putnam received nearly 53% of the vote with over 15,000 votes. His Republican challenger Tamma Tice received just under 14,000 votes. This will be Putnam's second term in office.
Another familiar face won the re-election bid, Dan Walgemot. He will be your representative for House District 14B. The Democratic candidate won with 51% of the vote. A nearly 500 vote gap separates him from his Republican challenger, Aaron Henning.
In a heavily contested race with nearly 100 votes separating the two candidates, Bernie Perriman won her re-election bid for State Representative District 14A. The Republican candidate won with 7,259 votes. Her Democratic challenger Tammy Calhoun received 7,060 votes. This will be Perriman's first term in office.
Moving over to District 6, Tom Emmer easily won his re-election bid. He received just under 199,000 votes with nearly 62% of the vote. His Democratic challenger, Jeannie Hendricks, received just under 38%. This will be Emmer's fifth term in Congress.
Races for government positions weren't the only thing on your ballot this year. Questions related to taxes also made an appearance. People in St. Cloud voted to increase the property tax to help fund parks, recreational trails, and public facilities. The tax increase will not exceed $20 million in total.
Results for a potential sales and use tax increase for renovating the Municipal Athletic Center, also known as the MAC, are in. The majority of people voted against the proposal that would have raised up to $21 million over a 5-year period.
There's a new face on the St. Cloud School Board. Former SCSU Athletic Director Heather Weems got about 17% of the votes during the election. 2 other St. Cloud natives faces will also return to the board. Zachary Dorholt led the vote count with about 20% and Natalie Ringsmuth at about 17% of the total votes.
After a long-fought battle for the governor's seat, Tim Walz has won the race after beating Scott Jensen by a 7.7% margin. This is Governor Walz's second term in office. He says he will continue to lead Minnesotans while supporting families and local businesses.
Over the past few months, many of you have talked to neighbors, you've got out and you've done the work, and you've talked about what matters to us as Minnesotans. You talked about the idea that we use and say, one Minnesota. It means everyone is valued. Everyone matters.
Every one of you here has helped shape the conversation. And if it isn't for this time around, it may be the next time. But regardless, we cannot imagine not having that powerful voice that represents a movement.
Tonight on UTVS News at 4:30, travelers on Interstate 94 in Monticello might notice something different on the highway. What MnDOT is testing.
Then, St. Cloud State University releases details on enrollment, how the numbers look compared to last year.
I felt like no one loved me. And I didn't like Valentine's Day. I wanted to ruin it for everyone.
But first, A jury decides the fate for the Parkland shooter.
UTVS News starts right now.
Tonight on UTVS News at 4:30. With just over 40 days until the midterm elections, early voting polls are now open.
Then, NASA crashes a satellite into an asteroid. The reason why this mission was crucial.
But first, online threats cause one school district to cancel school. How the community is responding.
UTVS News starts right now.
Tonight on UTVS News at 4:30, a local event drew quilters closer together. UTVS reporter Jessica Tao reports from the River's Edge Convention Center.
Then, fire devastates a popular ski resort in northern Minnesota.
But first, one final last day, the UTVS Weather Center has details on a very blustery but warm Tuesday.
UTVS News starts right now.
The winter weather sure caused headaches for many drivers on the road today. The Minnesota State Patrol says there were 139 crashes between 6 and 10 a.m. Thankfully, no fatal injuries were reported. Taking a live look now at Interstate 94 right outside Opportunity Drive in St. Cloud, things seem to be operating smoothly after a light dusting St. Cloud received this morning. For a live look at the road conditions throughout the state, visit 511mn.org or download the MN 511 app.
Our top story tonight, it's back to normal class routines for students at Apollo High School. Apollo was one of many schools around Minnesota yesterday to receive falsified reports of threats. The school resource officer at Apollo quickly responded and established no threat, and no disruptions were made to the school day.
The falsified threat at Apollo was one of 14 reports that took place all across the state. Police say these reports of falsified threats is what's known as swatting. This is when someone makes a prank call to law enforcement claiming an emergency and providing an address for a response. Some of the other schools involved in the swatting calls include Alexandria, Brainerd, Fergus Falls, Mankato, and Rochester, amongst others. None of these incidents have turned out to be real.
More than 43 million student loan borrowers will get more time before they have to start repaying those loans again. Later today, President Biden plans to extend a freeze on federal student loan payments to August 31st. The freeze began when the pandemic started and was supposed to expire on May 1st. This comes shortly after last month when Democratic lawmakers asked the president to extend the freeze through the end of the year. However, an effort to cancel some loans is still unresolved as of today. The president says he supports canceling up to $10,000 of debt per borrower.
Amazon workers in Staten Island can rejoice after successfully voting to form a labor union. The fight to form the union was tough as understaffed and underfunded organizers went up against the multi-billion-dollar company with known intentions of keeping unions out of its operations. Organizers relied on reaching warehouse workers personally by making TikTok videos, holding barbecues, cookouts, and even handing out free marijuana. However, a tough negotiation process is likely, as experts say, Amazon will drag their feet.
Well, if the thought of watching the Minnesota Twins play at Target Fields gives you the excitement for the spring and summer seasons, you might have to wait a little bit longer. The possibility of looming winter weather has Twins officials looking to push their home opener festivities. Officials state they are monitoring the weather closely and will make an announcement at least a day before the scheduled Thursday game. Back in 2018, Twins fans sat through a record-breaking first pitch temperature of 38 degrees. That's so cold. Brooke?
A man in Zion Township is dead after his vehicle became airborne and crashed into an unoccupied residence. The crash occurred last Friday where officials state 22-year-old Corey Sturgis was traveling northbound on County Road 195 when his vehicle left the roadway and entered the ditch. The vehicle continued to drive in the ditch where it struck a driveway approach and then became airborne and hit the residence. The vehicle was extremely damaged in the crash and life-saving measures were used upon arrival, but they were unsuccessful.
A Kingston Township man is recovering from a gunshot wound after a hunting accident over the weekend. Meeker County Sheriff officials say the accident occurred near County State Aid Highway 27. Officials and other agencies responded to the scene, including a Lifelink helicopter, where they found a 38-year-old Michael Hendrickson with a gunshot wound to the leg. The cause of the accident revealed an accidental self-inflicting discharge by Hendrickson as he was climbing his tree stand. Officials want to remind everyone to practice firearm safety while climbing in and out of their deer stands.
Deliveries of Western machinery to Ukraine are on the ground, including U.S.-made rocket launchers. That weaponry has helped the country accurately hit Russian targets from a safe distance. While Ukrainian officials are praising the billions of dollars in aid, they say more help is needed to turn the tide of the war. Ukraine's First Lady recently made an appeal to U.S. Congress for air defense systems. She says those systems, plus additional supplies, have been essential to replenish the losses. And a deal will restart the flow of grains out of Ukraine, which could impact your grocery prices. The United Nations reached a deal with Russia to unblock the exports. Representatives from both Ukraine and Russia will oversee the signing of the deal Friday. Ukraine is one of the largest grain exporters in the world, and the plan is to release nearly 22 million tons of grain stuck in Ukraine that will help ease a global food crisis. A New York appellate court upholds Harvey Weinstein's rape conviction. The 5-judge panel rejected Weinstein's claims that the judge should not have allowed women to testify about allegations that were not part of the criminal case. The 70-year-old is in jail in California, where he was extradited last year and is awaiting trial on the charges. He assaulted 5 women between 2004 and 2013. Minneapolis City employees can now enjoy 12 weeks of paid parental leave for the birth or adoption of a child. The city's previous policy only allowed employees to take 3 weeks. Studies show the time parents spend with their newborns can have a huge impact on their mental health. As we continue to monitor the COVID-19 pandemic, Minnesotans can now order another round of free at-home rapid tests online. Those who have previously ordered tests from the state's program are not eligible to receive 4 additional tests per household. Those who have not yet placed an order can now receive up to 8 tests at once. You can order the additional rapid tests online at mn.gov/COVID-19. Another delay to getting baby formula on the shelves, severe weather causing Abbott to stop production at its Michigan plant. The company says intense thunderstorms and heavy rains have damaged the production plant. Officials say they are working to resume production as soon as possible. The company had just restarted production in the plant after being closed for several months, causing a shortage. The delay is expected to last a few weeks, but Abbott says there is enough supply to meet demand. A popular e-cigarette maker can still sell its products in the U.S. despite a recent decision by the FDA. The agency ordered Juul to remove its products from the U.S. market back in June. The reason? The company did not provide enough evidence to prove that its products are safe. Juul appealed the ban. The FDA now says it will temporarily lift the ban and do additional reviews of the company's marketing materials. Cosmetics giant Revlon files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection after it struggles to keep up with the changing market and COVID-19 pandemic. The company escaped filing for bankruptcy 2 years ago, but it's now facing more than $3 billion worth of debt. Revlon struggled to keep up with its competitors, alongside celebrities who launched their own brands using social media trends. Even though sales have rebounded, it has not been enough for the struggling company. A mixed bag for those looking to hit the road this summer. A new report by the RV Industry Association shows manufacturers deliver nearly 12% more RVs to dealerships than last year. But there's also an increase in people looking for used RVs. Used RV inventory is still hard to come by as regular summer travel and sales are in full swing. Financial experts are projecting demand for RVs to remain strong throughout the rest of the year. They also believe inventory levels will remain below normal until early next year. Many parents can take comfort knowing more baby formula will soon be on its way to the U.S. Abbott, the makers of Similac, will ship about more than 1 million pounds of its formula from its plant in Spain. Roughly 686,000 cans of Similac Total Comfort and NeoSure are expected to arrive this month and throughout the summer. This news comes after Abbott was hit by a recall earlier this year over bacteria complaints. Tesla CEO Elon Musk met with Twitter employees virtually for the first time since he announced plans to buy the company. In the meeting, he answered pre-submitted questions read by a Twitter executive. One of Musk's key points at the meeting was to make sure Twitter was so compelling that you can't live without it. When asked if he would cut jobs, Musk reportedly said, quote, "Right now, costs exceed revenue, and that's not a great situation." More major retailers have quietly stopped selling glue traps for rodents. Those retailers now include Target, Big Lots, and Dollar Tree. Animal rights activists have condemned the traps for being unnecessarily cruel. CVS and Walgreens are some of the drugstore chains that have stopped selling the traps. Some good news might be on the horizon for college graduates who still have student loans. Bills introduced by House and Senate Democrats would allow graduates to refinance their loans with a 0% interest rate. The White House says the bill will help Americans quickly gain financial freedom. A study by NerdWallet says the American household owes more than $57,000 in student debt. As the summer travel season continues to heat up, American Airlines raised its second quarter revenue forecast. The company predicts revenue to increase between 11 and 13% above what was recorded in the second quarter of 2019. American Airlines joins Delta, Southwest, and JetBlue in expecting increased revenue as more Americans return to pre-pandemic traveling. Fans of Beyonce have something to be excited about as the singer announced she is releasing new music. Her new album, Renaissance, will be available on July 29th. This will be her first solo full-length album since she released Lemonade back in 2016. This announcement made her immediately trend on social media as fans are ecstatic to hear new music. Fans can pre-order Renaissance on Beyoncé's official online store. The dark side of the force was too strong to overcome for this man. Video shared online by police in Tulsa, Oklahoma shows a man stealing a Star Wars stormtrooper figure sitting right outside someone's home. Police are asking for your help in finding the suspect, saying the force will be strong with the chosen one who can bring in this nerfer before the Jedi Council. If you're an Amazon Prime member, there's an appetizing new perk thanks to a new partnership. Amazon and Grubhub are teaming up to offer meal deliveries with no fees for an entire year. This new partnership is called Grubhub Plus. Members can choose from hundreds of thousands of restaurants nationwide, but orders must be at least $12. After a year, Grubhub will automatically charge $9.99 a month to continue the service. This news comes as many food delivery services have seen a decline coming out of the COVID-19 lockdowns.